Iowa Live.
From the Kyle Chevrolet Studios in West Des Moines, welcome to Iowa Live. I am Lou, and you know what it's time for right now? It's time to visit with Kim Baer from the Baer Law Office to talk about something else that you really need to think about. And Kim, we are going to be talking about businesses today, right?
Yes. So if you're going to buy a business, I thought we'd give people tips on things that they need to be doing.
All right. First and foremost, what do we want to do? Because there's, 6 steps from what I understand?
Yes, so 6 steps. So the first step is you want to do your due diligence. So you want to make sure that you inspect the books, which is going to include the accounting records. It's going to include the tax, returns, things like that. So you want to take a look at everything because, I might be selling you a business and tell you, oh, it's great, I make this much money. Okay, well, let's look at all the documents.
Okay, now is this something that someone should do personally, or do you think they should have a professional look at the books?
Either way, it depends on how comfortable you feel. If you feel like you can read a tax return and you've owned businesses before, you might be able to do it. Sometimes we tell people, has your accountant taken a look at it just to make sure everything looks kosher.
Yeah, okay. So now let's talk about the next step. This is step number 2.
Right. So this is probably the most important step, and that is we want to make sure that you're only buying the assets, that you're not buying the business. And the reason for that is if I'm buying your business, I only want to buy the assets. I don't want to buy your liabilities.
Okay.
I don't want a year from now somebody to knock on my door and say, well, you bought the business and now you owe me $50,000 because here's this bill.
Does that happen very often?
It does. It does.
Really?
So we really have to be clear. Sometimes, as part of the deal, the buyer will buy some of the debt to help. But I hate doing that. I mean, we can do it, but the tip is only buy the assets. Don't buy everything.
Now, is that sometimes a deal breaker for some people?
It should be. It should be, unless you feel very comfortable. And the few times I've had somebody tell me they felt very comfortable, later they didn't feel so comfortable.
Okay.
So yeah, it didn't work out.
All right.
Yeah.
What is the next step?
Okay. So then the next step is we want to make sure that we get a non-compete from the seller. So a good example is I'm buying your business. I don't want you to go down the street and open up a competing business. So we need to have a non-compete that says you're not going to compete with me, for so many years and, within the state of Iowa or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now does that happen very often where someone might have that plan, they want to sell a business and then they want to go and continue it as under a different umbrella, so to speak?
I've had it happen a few times, and it's really standard as part of buying a business.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that you're going to ask for a non-compete.
Okay. Next.
Okay, then warranties. So we want to make sure, if I'm buying your business, I want to make sure you're giving me some warranties. And I'll give you an example. One standard warranty is that nothing has happened that will adversely affect the business that you know of. And so you're going to promise me that. So a good example is we had some clients buy a car wash, and the seller was selling the car wash because they knew there was going to be road construction.
Oh.
And that nobody's going to drive down road construction and get their car washed and then go drive down road construction.
Right, exactly.
Right. So that particular warranty really helped with regard to either undoing the deal or getting damages because something was known that wasn't disclosed.
All right, so you need to do your due diligence all the way around.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the warranties would be in the purchase agreement, and that's something your attorney can help you with.
Okay, now you talked about a car wash, but what if you're buying something that is franchised? Is that something a little different?
Yes, it is, and so you want to make sure that if it's a franchise, the franchisor has to give permission for the transfer of assets and the transfer of the franchise.
Okay.
And sometimes that takes months. I've had people come into me and they say, hey, next week we're going to close on this deal, and it's a franchise. And I'm like, whoa. Have you talked to the franchisor? Because that can take months.
And that's the parent company,
yes,
right?
That's the parent company.
Okay.
And then also, is there a lease? Are you going to take over a lease? Have you talked to the landlord? Is the landlord okay with that? So all of these are things that we have to do as part of the deal, and it takes some time.
So if it's a franchise, it's going to be a lot longer than if you just buy it from a personal seller with like a small business.
Right. So, because sometimes some franchisors are big, and it takes them months to figure things out because they're going to want information from the buyer. They're going to want financials. They're going to want all of that because they want to make sure that the franchise is going to be run properly and that the person has the money.
That's sustainable.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and
exactly.
finally, at think this one might be one of the most important ones.
Yes, one of the most important things is make sure it's all in writing. I just, you wouldn't believe, somebody will come to me and say this happened, and they give me the writing, and I say, well, I don't see that in there. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we talked about it and we agreed. Well, it's not in writing. And most of these contracts say if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable.
It even says it.
Yeah, it says that at the end.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you got to make sure it can be handwritten, it can be an addendum.
All right.
I mean, just make sure it's added to the contract.
I'm glad you said that. So if you do have a contract, for example, and it isn't on there, just take a pen out and put it on there to make sure it's on that final
staple
draft.
it on there. You both can sign it. You're all good, but it's got to be in writing.
So if you're
please.
buying a business, there's a lot of things to think about, a lot of things that you need to check off the list. If they want to do that, how's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, just give us a call, 515-279-2000. We love helping business owners.
All right. Kim Baer, thank you so much.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about buying a business, this is the person that you want to get a hold of. Make sure everything is done the proper way.
Yeah.